my great pleasure today to introduce Niloofar Mireshghallah, assistant professor at Carnegie Mellon University and a research scientist at Meta Research at FAIR. Niloofar earned her PhD in computer science and engineering from the University of California, San Diego in 2023, followed by a postdoc appointment at the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington. At FAIR, she's been tackling large-scale challenges in trustworthy machine learning and natural language processing. Her research at the intersection of privacy, NLP, and societal implications of AI has garnered significant recognition, including a Qualcomm Innovation Fellowship finalist spot in 2021 and the Rising Star in Adversarial ML Award in 2022. Beyond her technical accomplishments, Niloofar has demonstrated a genuine commitment to community building and mentorship. She's volunteered with the WIML, Women in Machine Learning Mentorship Program, served as D&I chair at major NLP conferences, and regularly speaks on how to communicate research to broader audiences. After first publishing under her legal name, she chose to go by Niloofar, which means, in Farsi, lily flower, to reflect a more personal identity in her work. She brings the same warmth, energy, and clarity to her talks as she does to mentoring. She's also very confidently her own woman. Since Niloofar's habit to eat healthy is not always compatible with the steady stream of pizza boxes at faculty meetings, I have it on good authority that Niloofar carries with her a little snack bag to provide alternative food options full of veggies, broccoli, and carrots, which she insists is the right balance of fiber and carbs without getting stuck in your teeth. Important for faculty talks and interviews. To that end, during her faculty interviews with faculty on prestigious university campuses, she often meets them in her office and then insists they go together on a walk outside so that she can up her step count. Her ability to blend rigorous science with a spark of human experience is precisely what makes her an exceptional scholar for our Camless keynote this morning. And I think you'll very much enjoy the energy that she and passion that she brings to the room today during her keynote. It makes it a great place for her to be at Camless. And so please join me in welcoming Niloofar. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I audible? I think this is not, oh shoot, this is not working. Okay. Oh, great. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. And thank you all for being here. I'm sorry if any of you have, I know one person at least, Supriti, has been victim of my walking and talking. I once walked her around the CMU campus in the dead of winter like 5 times, so I'm sorry. But yeah, that's also why I'm walking today. I like getting my steps in. Jokes aside, I feel very honored to be here and to be talking to you guys. I'm going to talk about privacy in large language models and also some adjacent security-related problems that I'm interested in. So feel free to interrupt me at any moment and ask questions. If you go over time, I will tell you to stop. But yeah, feel free to interrupt me. Or email me if you have anything that you want to talk about after, or you can catch me today or tomorrow around the venue. I really like collaborations and talking. Someone once told me that I'm perfect for academia because I like talking about work more than actually doing it. So yes, we can brainstorm and then we can find the right venue to do the work. Cool. So let me start. This is 2025, and I was told that I'm, going to talk about security and privacy. So what you would expect from this talk would be something like, first quintessential slide of, look how ChatGPT solved this theorem or IMO math, but then look how it can't count the R's in strawberry, right? Like it's really good, but it's also really bad. But instead of doing that, I kind of want to tell a story of how I see the field having shifted in the 8 or so years that I've been working on security and privacy in ML. So I want to take you back to 2018, where any adversarial ML talk had this slide in it of, if there is this hypothetical world in which classifying pandas really, really matters, and if in that world I add this specific pixels of noise to this image, then the panda becomes a given, and that's really, really bad, and that's an adversarial problem, right? And a fun fact is that this slide is actually from Canvas last year from Tom Goldstein's talk as well. So it is still relevant. But yes, for many years, that was kind of the thing. And same goes for privacy. So I guess, again, more people are familiar with the adversarial example and given. But for privacy, we also had a similar kind of evolution. There was 2019, this is from Usenix, and this is Nicholas Carlini giving a talk on, and back then we didn't even have GPT-2, or we were still using LSTMs for language modeling. So he was giving this hypothetical talk, this hypothetical case of maybe if one day we deploy these models large scale and they have memorized the training data, they might regurgitate it, right? And there's this XKCD that came out that year that is like, if you're autocomplete, you're typing long live the revolution, our next meeting will be at, and you press tab, 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 it might have picked up the location of the meeting from another conversation, memorized it, and regurgitated it, right? But this was all hypothetical, and he was saying that if this happens, maybe this is how we can measure it. Fast forward to 2 years later, same guy, same XKCD, still the same hypothetical problem, right? So even up until 2021, this was still something that we were like, yeah, maybe if the models really memorize it. In that year, they actually found that they could extract like literally a few sequences from GPT-2. So it was, again, a worst case proof of concept, but still not something realistic, right? So what I wanted to say with these is that for years, as adversarial ML and privacy researchers, we were kind of working on these hypotheticals and sitting in the reserve bench waiting to be tagged in, because none of these things were really happening, right? It's just like, what if this thing happens and then this matters? But then in late 2022, 2023, we had the ChatGPT moment, right? This thing that was supposed to be a low-key research product review release suddenly took off. So in the span of 5 days, there were 1 million users. Right now, there's like 700 million users. And it's also the second fastest growing app. So it really impacted people's lives. And it went from something that we didn't understand, a full black box that we were still doing research on, to this product that even my mom in the Middle East uses right now, right? So we should really be worried about that. And what this means is that now all of those things that were hypotheticals and we as security researchers were preparing for years were becoming true, right? So soon after, there was actual security attacks in the form of prompt injections that I think most people are familiar with, or hijacking sessions, and all these things that people have started to do with the chatbots that they were not intended to. And same happened with privacy, we had like the first real extraction attack from a large-scale language model where researchers were able to find some PII that was regurgitated by, memorized and regurgitated by the model. And this took a different turn when there was a New York Times lawsuit. So this was a more major memorization case where the model was actually regurgitating New York Times articles verbatim and caused this copyright problem. So what I'm arguing for is that we are at a point in time that privacy and security are more real problems than ever. And language models are now becoming more similar to software, right? It's not that we're developing them anymore, we're actually using them, and we can treat them as software and start to red team them and study their problems. I want to make the case for privacy and why we should work on privacy more today for two reasons. One is I think people do talk about security problems, and a lot of the security problems are similar to traditional security problems that we had when we had software. You had like data instruction separation issues that were in classical security and we have studied for years. But in terms of privacy, I think one is people are less incentivized to work on it, and two, we have new attack vectors that are not similar to anything we had before when it came to privacy of software. So I kind of want to talk about those new attack vectors and why they necessitate more people working on them. Okay, so what do I mean by new privacy problems? I'm going to show you a real example. So this is an example. I'm going to step away so you can see it. This is an example from this thing called WildChat. So WildChat was a service that ran till even a few months ago, where you could log into a Hugging Face. It's like a web page that is not OpenAI. You could use OpenAI models for free, the frontier ones, the newest ones, GPT-4, GPT-4o. But instead of paying for the service, you would have pre-hoc consent to have whatever conversations you have released on Hugging Face as a data set, right? So before you start using, you're giving consent, and then everything gets recorded and is released on the as part of the data set. And I was going through this data. It used to be 1 million conversations. Right now it's 4.8 million conversations. So I recommend you go and check it out because it's a treasure trove into the human psyche and what people say to these bots. It's also really interesting because of the pre-hoc consent. A lot of people forget that they're having the conversations. So you can actually see that happen, which is this interesting, from many HCI aspects. But I logged on to it mainly because I just wanted to find a motivation, like even a single conversation of people sharing very private data to use in a talk. Because every time I would go and talk, and this was in 2023, people would say, oh, no one uses a model like this. People know better. I just wanted one example. But then what happened was I found so many examples that we ended up writing a paper on it. But this is the most egregious one in my mind. So this is the case of a journalist who is dumping a private WhatsApp conversation that they've had with their source to ChatGPT, asking it to analyze this conversation and write an article off of it. And then they proceed to dump the entire WhatsApp conversation. We have taken out the numbers and everything is there. Where in this WhatsApp conversation, the mother of a sick child is complaining about healthcare in the country, and she's explaining the children that she has, their ages, their diseases, all of that. She's also giving away the name of another mother who might be interested in talking to this journalist, right? And again, these are all there. You can see we found the LinkedIn pages of the journalists, the two mothers. And then just to show you that this is not fake, we found the article that this person published on the news agency website, and it was a 60% match to the ChatGPT output, because we can also see that, right? So dude just copy pasted the entire thing, right? We also did this got us thinking about how many other journalists use the model, and we did a search last year, and we wrote a short paper on that one where we found 118 other articles that were ChatGPT generated and copy pasted, and the prompts were really interesting because people would dump something from BBC and say, write an article based on this, but don't make it obvious. So again, I really recommend that you go and look at the data. It's fun depending on how you define fun. But yeah, so this is an example. And what happened, just to walk you step by step and build a framework that we can talk and reason about privacy problems, is that it all starts with data, right? So we had this original conversation that has PII, identifiable information, and health records, and this data is fed to the model for either training or inference, right? In this case, for inference. Now, the model also outputted these people's diseases and a lot of things in the output article, and this output was used by the journalist to publish another article online, right? So this kind of flow of information and PII cascaded through this pipeline. And now it's going to be online, and it's going to be more training data for more models and just collected and kind of going on and on perpetually in this cycle. So this is what goes wrong. So how I reason about it is we have data, models, and people, and then we have training and inference and using the models, and then how it propagates forward. Now, let's see what went wrong at every step, because I love this example because there's things that go wrong in all of them. So let's see what went wrong in every step and how we could go about addressing it if we want to just take the most straightforward approach. So the first step is about consent and data collection and data retention, right? What happened was we had this journalist sharing data from himself and other people, right? Now, one counter argument that I usually get is, well, what if you just PII scrub this data before sharing it, right? That's the bare minimum you can do. So if I go to GPT-4o, even GPT-5, and give it the article and say, rewrite the following and remove the PII, this is what you would get. So it literally puts the name of the agency in the first line and doesn't remove it. And this is just to show you that models, especially models like ChatGPT, are really bad at PII scrubbing. In fact, older PII scrubbers are much better. And if you want to talk about it, find me. I have a lot to say about this, but I'll just keep it there. So these models are really bad. And one main reason is just any ambiguity in the data throws the models off. So it's really hard to get ChatGPT to PII scrub for you properly. Now, even if we assumed we had a perfect PII scrubber, it's still really hard to reason about this data, because what happened was you had the journalist sharing his information with ChatGPT, and then you had the mother sharing information about herself and the 3 children, and another mother with this person, and then this person is sharing it to ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT and WildChat is putting it online, and then the news agencies also. So it's this interconnected web of data that who owns it? Like, who can actually give consent here? Even if we were to do things properly and collect consent. So it's really hard to take away this metadata, this connection, and actually anonymize data. And this is one thing that over and over from, I think, even early 2000s or even before, people have shown that anonymization of data is not enough, right? You can always de-anonymize with other pointers, with metadata, with other data sets. There's this famous Netflix price incident that most people in privacy would know about. But we also showed last year that for text, this is even worse because you have so many markers. You have the style of writing. So we showed that if you take a medical notes data set and anonymize it, like PII scrub it, you can still re-identify 89% of individuals with 2 bits of side information. So it still happens even with unstructured text. So data and consent, this is really hard to reason about. What about the model? So this is the most common argument because the model can see this data and memorize it, right? So a lot of the times people say we only train on publicly available data, right? That's what most companies say. They say that we have this and this and this policy for privacy. We don't train on your data. One argument that I usually make is that we're hitting a data wall, right? Everyone talks about how we've run out of all public data, how some companies are going around scanning books and putting them into models. And there is incentive to use the user data because there's hundreds of billions of tokens going into models like ChatGPT. So why not use it? Now, there's a counter argument from the ML and NLP side that a lot of people say that we've hit the data wall with language. So a lot of people are proponents of other data modalities. They're like, even if you have all the more data and you train on all the private data, you've hit this plateau and there's nothing more you can squeeze out of text. This is arguable. I still think there is more to be learned from text. But even if you take that argument, I have another counter argument. We are heavily underestimating non-English users of models and overestimating cross-lingual transfer. So in a lot of cases, people make the English model better, and they're like, oh, this will transfer well. And I think this is really wrong right now. And the reason I think this is we're good with high resource languages, and low resource languages, we're bad at them, and everyone has accepted that we'll never be good. But this is the first time that for mid-resource languages like Farsi, the models are just good enough that people use them, but not good enough to actually be precise. And this is where you would get the most bang for your buck if you use the private data. So I argue that if we want to get good at other languages that people are using, there's 76 languages that people constantly use with ChatGPT. We do really need to use this private data, and it can actually go a long way. So even if you've hit a data wall, we still need the data for multilingual models. Now, the last step, and this is getting better more recently, is people. So a lot of times there's this conversation of you need to get people educated, and you need to stop them from sharing data or using the models like this. So yeah, but we saw that even a journalist who's supposed to know these things became oblivious, right? It's so easy to forego your oversight and just forget what you're doing and who you're talking to. And in fact, we found that 21% of the queries that were in ChatGPT had some form of identifying information that helped us find like a LinkedIn page or a page for the owner. And another thing is if you go on TikTok, if you don't believe in research, go on TikTok. There's all these trends of people saying how to use the model as your therapist. Or even if you're careful, a lot of times people are like, okay, I use vanish mode and I don't share anything about my data. There's this trend that people dump their Hinge conversations in ChatGPT and ask if this is going to be a good match or should I continue dating this person, right? So even if you're very careful, anyone you're talking to is probably dumping your conversations to ChatGPT and asking what you think. So it is really hard to control data, and I think putting it on people is not the right way to go. Good. So with all of this in mind, what should we do? Like what can we do if there are all these problems? I want to argue that because of the nature of how intimate this data is. This is different from Reddit data, right? It's like people's darkest secrets. And because of how much people use it, privacy is more important than ever. And another thing is, you can see this if you look at the trend of papers published in the past few years in ML, NLP, and security venues. So we did this study in the past, like in the last decade, and looked at ML, AI, ML privacy papers. And you can see that the numbers are going higher. But one problem is, although privacy is more important, privacy is not just memorization. So if you look at these papers, more than half of them are on memorization. And I want to make the argument today that if you take away one thing is that there are enough people working on memorization, and we should work on other things. It's not just that there are not enough people working on other things. It's actually, you can catch me and I will give you a whole spiel. I don't think we will have privacy problems from memorization. It's very unlikely that models at this size will memorize user data at a level that they would regurgitate it. This is something that happens with books. It happens with New York Times articles because it's high quality data that they train on over and over again. It's much less likely to happen with user data, unless it's multilingual and a corner case, which I am very glad to discuss later. But yeah, my main point is we need to focus on this other thing, because this other is actually what will matter in the next 1 to 5 years. So what is other? I want to talk about other now. Yeah, so what I'm going to do today is, from these 3 problems and the ways we can mitigate them, I'm not going to talk about measuring and reducing memorization. But if you want to talk about it, you can catch me after. I've done my entire work has been on this. So it actually takes a lot out of me to say that it doesn't matter as much anymore. But what I want to talk about is the 2 new vectors of attacks that matter these days and we should be worried about if you're thinking about agentic AI and privacy. So first one is measuring flow of information from input to output, which I will explain. And then the second one is how we can build tools to actually get the models to reason about this flow, and also prevent people from using models to stalk or dox or do bad things. So models as softwares and tools for harm themselves. Good. I'll pause here for a second to see if there are any questions. Okay. Any questions online or on chat or anything also? Because I figure.
I'll take. There are 2 online so far. One, isn't it interesting? I think it was the GPT-4 technical report that claimed that GPT-4 surpassed the traditional PI scrubbing, surpassed the scrubbing ability of traditional PI scrubbers.
Right.
Which is not true.
Not true. Okay. So I call not true on that. The main thing is the way you do PI scrubbing really matters on how you test it. One thing with these models is that they're bad at long context and they're really bad at complex context. And I really differentiate these two. Complex context is something that is information heavy. So if you break down your sequence to sentences and feed it sentence by sentence and ask it to PII scrub, that might work. But when you dump in a whole document, that's when it gets bad. So the way they do those benchmarkings is not how people actually use it. It's how you can game to use it. So it's not in practice that good. Like a BERT-based NER, like named entity recognition, is much better than ChatGPT.
It's the Kaggle version of PII scrubbing.
Yeah, I think I have to see the data set, but I don't know.
And one more online question, then we'll let you go. Continue. The point about underestimating non-English users was really interesting. Have we seen similar trends there to the journalist example, but in the non-English case?
Yes. Okay. So if you look at those papers, I really wanted to put more examples in, but there's just so many stuff, so I had to take it off. There is in that paper where we looked at what types of sensitive information people shared, there were a lot of examples of Chinese, Iranian, and Arabic users that had dumped a lot of private information. The Chinese cases was a lot of people that were professors, and you could find them, used the model to write recommendation letters. So they dumped a lot of undergrad student information. So that is one case that was very common. I remember 2 or 3 cases at least that we found. In the case of Iranians and Arabic people, it was a lot of them would dump information about themselves or their families to write letters to the embassy, because you need those to be in English, right? So that's another thing that we found a lot, and we were able to re-identify. Like there was a couple real passport numbers that we found for these embassy kind of letters. And one thing that surprised me was that why Iran and China? I'm Iranian. I feel really bad that it didn't click with me because I was like, the highest users, there's US users of this wild chat thing, and then there's Iran and China. And I was surprised. I was like, if you want to use something for embassy, or you're writing a rec letter, why would you use wild chat if you're a professor? And why is this so skewed towards Iran and China? Does anyone have a guess? There's someone in the back. Yes? Banned, yes, ChatGPT is banned. And I felt so bad not knowing this as an Iranian because I've only left like 6 or 7 years ago. I should have remembered this. Like I should know everything is banned in Iran. So that's why people would rather have that. They're like, okay, whatever, 2 people are going to see my PII. I would rather use the model and make my life easier, which says a lot about the cost of privacy and how much people are willing to pay, right? Anyways, I would love to chat about that too, but thanks for the question. Okay, now I have to rush through the rest of this. Okay, so I want to show you a real world example to tell you what I mean by input-output leakage. So this is an example from last year. It was an OpenAI had this, 12 days of Christmas. They were streaming, each day they were streaming a product. And this is day 7, they were streaming projects. The only reason I was watching this, to be honest, is that one of my close friends was presenting it. So I was trying to be supportive, which made me actually angry, as you will see. So I watched this, and they were introducing projects. So projects, the whole point was you would dump a lot of information about something you're trying to get done into the model in the context, and then ask it to do something, and it would make the right calls and actually go and do that thing. What they were doing was they were trying to set up Secret Santa. So they had this whole, list of people and gifts, and they asked them also, they had dumped it there, and then they gave the instructions to the model that you're the principal of Santa's workshop, a funny game thing, like go send emails to these people, tell them who is buying what gift, what is, how Secret Santa operates, basically. But then what happened was that as they pressed this and they asked the model to do it, the model generated the email, and in the email, it's telling everyone who they're buying a gift for and what to buy. And then in the next line, it says, keep your gift a surprise. So it's spoiling the surprise and telling the model to keep this surprise. So it clearly knows what a surprise is, but it cannot identify and operationalize it, right? And they laughed this off, and they were like, haha, models are funny because this was a live stream, and they moved on. But I got angry because I had told my friend about this problem for a year every day, and he did not listen to me. So a year before this, we released this benchmark called Confined. So we asked the questions, can LLMs keep a secret? And we looked into surprises and different types of things where you have something in the context. So you see how this is different from memorization, right? Memorization, the information is in the model parameters. But here, it's not in the model parameters. It's in your files. It's in your context. It's in your data store, somewhere else. And it's leaking to the output. And this matters a lot because when we have agents, we're kind of cascading and not looking at the output and input. So it just kind of goes and flows over. So it's really important that what goes into the output is appropriately propagated to the output. Again, this was not a problem before because you run the model, you have control over input and output. It's really the first time that the input is from us and the output might just go somewhere else without us checking it. So that's why it matters now more than ever. Okay. So this is the leakage of input to output problem. Now, what we did was we tried to measure this in a principled way to understand if models know the context in which they should reveal different types of information. And what we did was, unlike a lot of work in NLP that reinvents the wheel, we actually looked at the literature in terms of privacy and privacy policy and philosophy, and we picked this notion of privacy as contextual integrity. So we picked contextual integrity, and what we did here is we used this framework. So the framework of contextual integrity states that you don't have sensitive and non-sensitive information. So it's not that SSN is sensitive and I don't ever share it, and the color of my hair is not sensitive, so it's okay if everyone knows it. It states that you need to judge flows of information. And the flow of information is that you have to define the sender, the information, the recipient, and the transmission principle, or what we call here purpose. So what am I sharing with whom and for what makes it clear if I should go forward with the flow. And we built a multi-tier benchmark, which I'll walk you through it, of different levels of context and complexity to see if models can reason about it. So the first tier is just information without context. So we ask questions. We ask questions like, how much does sharing this information meet privacy expectations? And the information is SSN. The model says -100. Don't ever share your SSN. But then in the second tier, we give it more context. So we add an actor and a use. You're sharing your SSN with your accountant for tax purposes. Is this okay or not? The model says yes. So you add one step of context. And then in the third tier, so this one, we call it the theory of mind tier or the secret tier. Here we argued that a part of context is our idea of the belief graph in other people's heads. What this means is if I'm throwing a surprise party for Alice, and you're not Alice, but you're a friend, I will tell you about this party because I want you to help me, right? But I won't tell Alice because I know that Alice does not know about it, right? This is theory of mind, what I think you know about something. So if whether or not I choose to reveal a secret has to do with that. So we build these scenarios where we have 3 people, 2 of them are talking about a secret, and then we put the model in a state where it can reveal the secret to a third person or not and see if the model would do it or not. So we give it, the situation, should you reveal the secret to make Jane feel better? And then we ask the model, what should Alice say? And then the model would say, Alice should say whatever. So this is a third tier. It only has like this one secret and a theory of mind. And then the last tier is the most complex one and the most realistic one. We call this the privacy utility trade-off. So here we have these, and again, this benchmark was developed in 2023, so this feature was not real back then. But we imagined if Zoom could transcribe chats and then send to-do items based on that, which is something that exists now. And we generated the synthetic conversations between 5 people in a workplace where they discuss something that everyone needs to know, like a group meeting or an offsite, and then something that one person should definitely not know, like a surprise birthday party, someone getting laid off, something like that. And then we would ask the model to generate to-do items and email it to each person. And it would generate emails like this. Alice, remember to attend your own surprise birthday party. So this is why I was pissed off when I saw the live stream, because this was exactly a scenario from a data set from a year ago. So these are the 4 kinds of tiers. And each tier we have a lot of factorial vignettes, we have a lot of scenarios, but that's kind of the gist of it. So does this make sense to people? Any questions? Okay, great. Oh my God. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to just quickly go over some of them. This is not me. I think someone else is fiddling with the microphone. Okay. Okay. I'm going to just show you some of the results, but look at the paper for more because there's just so much more. The first thing was that for tier 3, which was the secret keeping one, what we found was GPT 3.5, which was the original ChatGPT. It would reveal secrets 93% of the time. And that was because it was so tuned to be verbose and to be helpful. And that meant it would just give you as much information as possible to be helpful. GPT-4 was actually much better. It would only reveal secrets 22% of the time, which is still really high, but arguably better. But one interesting thing was that using thinking models or chain of thought does not necessarily improve this. So this is one interesting thing, is that a lot of the times when the model is trying to reason about the secret, it actually gets locked in on it and ends up revealing it inadvertently. I'll show you an example. So some aspects of it does get better with chain of thought. So telling them all to think step by step or reason about the problem does not always help. So this is one thing. Another thing was we did these heat maps where we went over different secret types and relationship pairs and incentives, like if it's between your coworkers or between friends. And what the secret is. Is it like a health problem, religion, infidelity? And also we switched the incentives. So you can have incentives like monetary incentives, right? Maybe if you reveal something, you win a wager or you get a bonus. And then we also have incentives like just to provide help to someone. So we created scenarios that kind of combinatorially go through all these different ones. We took these from a psychology study, by the way, on secret keeping behavior in humans. So we took the exact secrets from those and the incentives from those. So we didn't just sit and make up stuff. And what we found, which is interesting, was that we saw the most secret revealing behavior when the incentive is to provide help. So if you convince the model that by revealing the secret, it's going to help someone's life get better or just be helpful, it reveals the most secret, but the monetary incentives reveal the least secrets. So we think this is a direct byproduct of alignment, because alignment has the objective of helping people, and now it can go, go south like this. So this was one thing that we found. And then another thing was that we also found that the cultural elements, so like the names you pick for the scenarios, like if it's Alice and John, it's different from if it's Ali and Zenab, which is also interesting. We didn't really dig deep into it in the paper, but if you're interested, I would love to chat about it. So this is one thing. And now let's have a look and do like a manual error analysis of what happens when a secret is revealed, like why the model does this. So we found that, I think the numbers are gone, but it's like, I think 53% of the time, around 50% of the time, the model acknowledges privacy, but reveals the secret. So it says something like, but I think it's important to consider Jane's privacy and the trust she placed in me by confiding in me about her affair, right? So as it's saying that I should not do it, it goes and does it. Same with revealing the secret, right? It's very interesting because the model clearly knows the norm and the premise, but it is not able to use it, which is a very interesting failure. So this is a downright a model capability failure, right? Another 38% of the time, we have these things that we call theory of mind failures. So the model assumes the other person knows the secret. So it says something like, as you know, Adam and I have maintained confidentiality about his transformation and what he's going through. And the bad thing here is that we clarify in the prompt that no one else knows this. So the model does not need to like read between the lines. It knows that no one else knows, but it still has this failure. And then we had like 3% of the time, it acknowledges privacy, reveals the secret, and then promises this person that I won't reveal your secret to someone else, which is the most human behavior, right? So 3% of the time, we have this 8% of the time where the model acknowledges privacy. It actually just, it acknowledges privacy, but just goes and reveals the secret anyway. So it like really doesn't give a reason of why it's doing it. So what I want to say is that the bulk of this problem is operationalization of this knowledge failure and theory of mind failure. So these are the main two things that create the problem. And then after like we put out the benchmark, there's like a lot of amazing work from different from different industries and different folks focusing on this notion of contextual integrity and contextual privacy. But I feel like we're still at the beginning, and this concept of contextualness is not just for privacy. It applies to many other things, and we really need to get models to be better at reasoning on the go about situations rather than unlearning and editing them every time. So this is like on this part. Now, one thing that I often get when I talk about this is once we get models that are better at reasoning, don't these problems just go away? Like you get a model that's better at emergent behaviors, doesn't this get better? And one thing that I want to remind people of constantly is that people are optimizing the benchmarks for math and coding, right? They're building models that are better at math and coding. So if you look at the growth from like July 2023 to like, a couple months ago on math, coding, AMI, SWE-bench, like software engineering and coding, you can see that it's very steep. Like, the growth is fast and kind of, I don't know if it's exponential, but it's fast. And this is always the best model on that thing. So it's not a single model. But then if you look at capabilities that are softer kinds of reasoning, like research, so you have deep research bench, and also simple bench is a benchmark of just simple social reasoning. So this is the two new lines. I'll just go back. See, it's much flatter. So when you don't optimize for something, you're not going to get improvement on it. And this is not something that will just transfer directly from math and coding. And the main reason is math and coding is really not contextual. There is one ground truth. It's verifiable. You get it. Privacy or social norms, they're much softer and harder to grasp. And we are not going to directly get them. So we need people to work on these issues separately and like maybe in parallel, and not just sit and hope that math and coding is going to give us these benefits. Okay. So so that these things don't transfer out of the box. And with that, I want to conclude this part of the talk. So the main takeaways are we're using models differently right now. We have input-output flow, which is not something that we had before. Models are interactive, so you can actually query the model and try to get a secret out, multi-turn. And they have access to data stores. They can go on and do things. And this means that you have to think about them and their privacy problems differently. Now, this also brings about fundamental capability failures, such as models not being good at abstraction, inhibition, and composition, which I'll talk about more. But basically, the more things you put in the prompt, the worse the model behavior gets. And yeah, I'll talk about abstraction and inhibition a bit more. Yes, there's a question.
The chain of thought doesn't help
Yeah.
much. Do you have any insights? The chain of thought doesn't help much with improving tier 3 tests that you did, but do you have any insights about negative versus positive instructions and stuff like that?
Okay, this is a great point. So the inhibition, so the question is negative versus positive instructions and chain of thought. So I mentioned models are not good at inhibition. There is a difference. One thing that makes privacy interesting is that it's more about don'ts than do's, right? Don't share an SSN, don't do this. And what happens is models overgeneralize if you try to prompt tune. So in the paper, we do have different versions of prompts that think about privacy, think about privacy norms, apply these privacy rules. So the model either doesn't share anything or it shares everything. And that's what creates a problem is models are not good at disentangling and then changing the levels of granularity of things, which is one of the things that I'll talk about in future work. So yeah, it's really bad. It either shuts down or shares everything, and there's no in between. Okay. I have one more thing that I want to talk about, so I'll go over it quickly, and then we'll get to future work. Do we have till 10:20 or 10:50? 10 more minutes. Okay, great. Okay, so we talked about problems. Now let's talk a bit about solutions, and then talk about more problems that you can work on. So how can we build tools to help people control their data? One way to tackle this input-output problem or any other privacy problem is to just sanitize the data before it leaves the device, right? So then you have control. You don't have to be at the mercy of companies. You can take control over your own data. And this helps because a lot of times we see all these leakages, right? You know, there was a Grok leakage. There's DeepSeek data got leaked. So this is bound to happen. So if you have the data on-premise clean, then we're like good. So how do we go about doing this? And what happens if you do it? Let's say you have a medical query that reads like this. I'm a 34-year-old trans woman. I take oral estrogen, 4 milligrams a day for 3 years. These are my symptoms. What is wrong with me? Right? So you have this medical query, and you send it to ChatGPT because you want a good response. And it says, oh, possible causes could be a pulmonary embolism, which is a medical emergency. So you really need to go to the doctor fast, or cardiovascular strain, respiratory causes, or anemia. So it gives you 4 options. And the true, like the first prediction is actually the right one based on, this is from Medicare data set. So this is good, you get the right response. Now, if you minimize your data locally to remove the things that you're not comfortable with sharing, so if you remove this part about being a trans woman and taking estrogen, the prediction pulmonary embolism completely goes away. So it's not even in the predictions anymore, which is very dangerous, right? So a lot of the times you cannot minimize the data because it will, like the part that you care about and is sensitive, removing it will give you a worse response, which could, you know, be significant and deadly. So what can we do in these cases? The way I would ideally see this is if you could minimize the data, send your query, get it back, and then add the private information after, right? So restore this so you still get the prediction. So this is kind of the idea behind what I want to show you. This is a work in progress, so it's not fully done. So this is like, I think, the kind of work we should be doing. But so we did this work, which is called privacy preserving LLM interactions, where we come up with a way of reasoning, we call it Socratic reasoning, to get models to give you strategies for solving a problem rather than actually solving it. So let's have a look through an example. Let's say we have Alice and she asks, why do I keep having fevers? So she's just giving one symptom. This is very small, right? And then you have all of her medical records, maybe in Epic or MyChart or whatever is sitting, the EHR is sitting in an encrypted data store somewhere. So she sends the query, why do I keep having fever? And we have 2 zones. We call this a trusted zone and an untrusted zone. The trusted zone, it could be her hospital or her own computer. And then the untrusted zone is wherever is hosting her medical data encrypted, or ChatGPT or other models. So we kind of have this, create this separation. And what we do is the trusted zone receives this query, and it sends it to ChatGPT, but it doesn't send her medical records with it. It just sends the query along with a prompt that promotes a certain type of reasoning. So now ChatGPT, instead of giving me a list of diseases or just one prediction, what we get ChatGPT to do is to generate a graph. So it's a question and answer graph of, if the fever follows a pattern, then you should suspect this. If you have traveled to this country, then you should do this. So it creates this kind of like a decision tree, a Q&A graph that you can then add your data in and narrow it down, right? So instead of getting one question, we get these sub-queries of how often do you get symptoms? Have you traveled? And we get all of these back into the local device. Now, what we do here is we take these sub-queries, because in the real world, all of your medical data or all of your data is not located on premise necessarily, right? You could have different medical results from different hospitals. So what we do is there's this embedding and encryption part that you can have a look at the paper. We actually tried really hard to refine it so that you can do homomorphic encryption and it actually works. But I'll just quickly give you an overview. What we do is we embed these queries, and then we turn these embeddings, we encrypt the vectors. We send queries to a database server that holds all of her medical records. We get it back, we unencrypt it, we get the relevant results, and then locally on a very small 1 billion model, we run the query, so we get the private data, and we also have the decision graph, so we feed all of that to a model, and then we basically traverse this graph, filling in the private records, and then get the prediction. So like, she has fever every 2 days, she just traveled to Africa, and the model would say you probably have malaria, right? So we kind of disentangle, we do the hard part of the reasoning and the strategy, we offload it to a model, we get that back, and then we rehydrate the data basically and add the private information and kind of get a more accurate prediction. So this is, I think, a nice framework to think about how you can have local and remote interactions. Obviously, it works well for this scenario and some other scenarios, but it's not super simple to get these predictions all the time. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing more of this type of work where you kind of divide up the labor. It's very similar in a sense to distributed learning or federated learning, but it's still a bit different. And what we see is there's some interesting things here. One is even on a single model, doing this kind of two-step prediction of first like asking the model not to give you a response, but instead give you reasoning chains and questions, improves model performance. So even on like ChatGPT alone, that's the first line, you go from 80% accuracy to 92. And on a llama model, you go from 64 to 82. So even on a local model, if you don't care about privacy, you still get improved performance because the model now thinks for longer in a sense. But also, you actually get improved performance. Like you get 82%, so you can beat GPT-4o alone with, again, a Llama 1 billion model. Super interesting. And yeah, if you mix ChatGPT with Llama, you actually get the best performance, which is nice. So you also just get, you basically get, you can have your cake and eat it too. Like you're getting better accuracy and you're not sharing the data. Now, this is just, an idea, like a thought experiment. There is a lot of things to do here. One is how you can do the on-device minimization. Like I just told you, we send the fever. How do you figure out what bit of information to share and what to keep local? So that is a huge problem, which I think is really interesting. And then how do you restore accuracy properly? Because for a lot of domain-specific things, like for medical data, it's actually really hard to get a good local model to perform well. And then there's all these questions of how can you get better chain of thoughts from the remote model, and how can you get this whole thing to run smoothly and faster and end-to-end and for people to comply. Okay, so any questions from this like short little thing? That there's one question, yes.
But this the Socratic method, does it always only work when the user gives very little information, because it has to ask things, right?
Right, yeah. This is a great question. So what is the sweet spot of how much you share and how much you hold? Because again, technically, let's say if your data it has 10 facts, you could like try sharing facts one by one and see what gives you the best trade-off, right? And which facts you share also matter. So this is a cool game theoretic problem, and I think it's like a very cool little research paper. We didn't do a nice evaluation on it. We just kind of changed things and found that if you send 2 bits of information, that's like the best thing. So we kind of went with that. But I think it's a really interesting information and game theoretic question to ask. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'll go to future work so that we have time for more questions as well. What I want to say about the future work is that I think we're at an inflection point, and I bet everyone is saying this, and I even said it at the beginning, but now I want to give another perspective of how this time it's different. So before 2023, we had in NLP separate models for separate tasks. Machine translation had its own encoder-decoder architecture. You had part of speech taggers that had models like BILSTMs, and then you also had different like MLP style classifiers for sentiment analysis. So very different architecture, different data sets used, and you would get improvements incrementally, which meant you would get risks incrementally as well. Right now, we're just getting all the compute and all the data and just like throwing them together. We are discovering emergent capabilities like, models can do in-context learning, their theory of mind is getting better. So all of these capabilities we're discovering incrementally. We're actually discovering by trial and error, which means that the risks are also going to be emergent, and we have to like think outside the box and figure out the new risks. And with this, I think there's 3 main questions from a privacy standpoint that I'm interested in. One is, how can we educate people about how data collection really works and which model providers they can trust and how to share their data to get good service? Because there's a lot of misconception. Like people think that, this company said the data is private, but it's actually technically maybe even less private than ChatGPT. So that's one thing. The second is, how can we formalize this new attack vectors that I talked about? And then the last thing is, how do we build local tools to, again, help people minimize their data? So educating about consent. So I want to talk about an incident. This happened maybe a couple months ago in July, where someone found that a lot of ChatGPT conversations had become discoverable online. And it was because there was this feature that when you shared a chat, you could check mark it and say, make this chat discoverable. And a lot of people, just by habit, this is, again, I got into a whole Twitter fight about this with someone because they said people are stupid because, why would you check this? It's very obvious. But I actually think it's not obvious for a lay user. Also, if you use Google Docs a lot, if you don't check mark that thing, the person can't see it. So I think by default, people are used to check marking these random things. So anyway, so this made the whole thing. And then, they removed the feature and they changed the UI. But this is so preventable if you talk to usable privacy people. The problem with a lot of LLM frontier labs is that they think anything HCI or usable privacy is not technical enough, and they think they're designing technology just for themselves and not for people. So this pisses me off because I think this was so preventable. And then there's also other things like, Sam Altman says, we don't have any legal confidentiality when you use ChatGPT as a therapist. And again, these are things that people don't necessarily know, right? Just because you said it on a podcast doesn't mean you're doing due diligence. So views are my own, by the way. So this is one problem. Another thing, this made me really angry. So this was last year. I was working on my job market material, and I used Claude a lot. And I realized that, I work on privacy, and I'm using Claude, and I've never checked the privacy policy. So let me go down the rabbit hole of figuring it out. Also, Claude has this, Anthropic has this whole notion of you're the transparent ones. They really pride themselves on their very good data policies. So I was like, let me actually figure it out. So I went through the privacy policy documents, and I saw that they say that, we only have a 30-day data retention. We don't train on any user data. It's like, unlike every other company, we are like opt in and not opt out, except if you give explicit consent. So this was like the word. And I thought, this explicit consent is not defined. Let me go figure it out. So I go down a rabbit hole of like 10 blog posts later. Explicit consent is if you provide direct feedback. Now I'm like, what is direct feedback? So I thought it's if you go to a forum and like paste a chat and say, this is bad, fix it. That's direct feedback. That is what I thought as a privacy researcher. But then again, 2 hours later and 10 blogs later, I realized if you thumbs up or thumbs down a conversation, that entire conversation is explicitly feedback. they can retain it for 7 or 10 years, and then anyone can look at it, they can train on it, whatever. And again, all the terms become explicitly consented, which blew my mind away. And it's like the most deceptive thing in the history of time in my books. But you don't really have to worry about it anymore, because as of September 28th, they also switched to an opt-in kind of thing. So it's whatever. The same goes for OpenAI. If when it gives you 2 responses, if you pick them, you're explicitly consenting. So I usually just close the chat when it does this to me. I'm like, I'm not doing. Yeah. So this is another one. And again, none of this with respect to OpenAI even matters, because they're under this lawsuit by New York Times. And now a judge has said they are supposed to retain everything, all the conversations, even if it's enterprise or pro or whatever, because it's destroying evidence if they don't. So this is actually the first time that privacy lawyers are teaming up with OpenAI to like fight a judge, because this is really, really bad for privacy. I think maybe a couple weeks ago they overruled it. I haven't checked, but this was also really bad, because now a judge is just like, oh, you have to maintain everything. So when you went online to OpenAI to read their data policy, there was this star that said none of this applies right now because of this court order. So yeah, so that's another thing. A judge can decide whatever happens to your data. Now, this one is sensitive content, so it's about suicide. So if you want to step out, I'm not going to make it explicit, but there are a lot of lawsuits right now of how models, I wouldn't say facilitate, but are involved in suicides. And one of them, the parents of this teenager who committed suicide are very vocal about it, and they've shared a lot of stats and information about this case. So I went through it. I spent a good bunch of time going through it. The reason I brought it up is that there were mentions of there was 1,200 mentions of suicide over 6-month conversation with them all. They also released a lot of you can find the chats and everything. To me, it seemed like this could have been preventable. Like the model helped the person plan things, helped a lot of things that, again, it's concerning, but it's the other side of the coin, right? Like how can we have access to this, and we could maybe prevent some tragedies from happening? So how can we do it in a privacy preserving way? Because on the other hand, if I'm like a psychologist and I'm researching suicide and I'm asking the model, I don't want it to call the cops on me, right? So, and I feel like in this case, it was actually clear-cut enough that interventions could have been made. So this is another thing that I think about a lot, is both use of these models as therapists, as coaches, as whatever, how much they can persuade you to do something bad, maybe harm someone else or yourself. I think this is really bad. One thing that bothers me about this is that this really got me to think about just self-harm and benchmarks for that. So I started building this benchmark to just see if models refuse, and all the prompts still work. The model, you just have to say, I mean, you can read this. I'm not going to read it out loud, but it tells you how to do things. It does calculations for you. And it was worse because the reasoning model even calculated that, told me the type of rope and how, So it's really bad, and it's worse with reasoning models. So I think we need to do something about this. I'm just gonna, So that's it. These are some things about data and data collection, and how there's 2 sides to it. You don't want things revealed, but then with teenagers and self-harm. Now, another thing is some new attack vectors that are appearing when you use LLMs as software and as engine, like a search engine or an inference engine. So here you're seeing an example of using an LLM as a search engine. One of my friends who's a dentist, she was like, oh, can you deep research me and see what you find? So I did that. I put her name in, and I found the name of her pet cat, which is very strange because it was a very peculiar Farsi name. And I was like, did you ever share this online? How did the model find it? And very confused for a long time. We were both trying to figure out how it found the pet cat's name. And we found it was embedded in an HTML tag on her professional dentistry website, because the photo she had given them was cropped from the photo with the cat. So it was embedded there in a comment or something. And the model found it and just gave it instantly. And the problem here is that this really streamlines doxing, stalking, what have you. But it's also bad because things like maiden names and pet cat names and stuff are secondary questions when you're trying to recover your password. So you can find this information, run inferences, learn a lot of things, and then maybe hijack someone's account. So this is one bad thing. And then there is other things that like models are really good at inferring things. So even if the data is not online and it's not searching, if you dump text written by someone or a photo, they're really good at geolocating, right? They're really good at telling you how old someone is or how to target them. So this could really enable targeted scams or just elderly abuse in a sense. So that's another thing. So inference and aggregation is now automated and super fast. And again, it's not right to say the models should not do it. We should just think of how we plan to make safeguards around these capabilities. And then there's all these third-party tools like the OpenAI connectors, Claude connectors, MCP, the model context protocol. So all of these things that open up doors for more types of attacks, because now it's not just you and the LLM. It's connected to bazillion tools that can also try and abuse the data. Okay, and then finally, how do we build tools to minimize this risk? So I talked a lot about the risks. One thing that I'm very excited about, as I mentioned, is minimization. So if you can locally minimize the data properly, that's really good. So we're doing a lot of research on that. And this is a recent paper we did. Here, our main goal was to figure out how much redundant information people put in their queries in an actual greedy search optimal way. So what we did was that we took queries, we broke them down into pieces, and we actually kept removing parts until the utility drops to see how much of the data is objectively, it's not just from a subjective standpoint, how much of it is objectively overshared. And we find that with GPT-5 and GPT 4.1, you can redact 85% of the query and it still gives you a good response. This is much lower for bad models. So it could be that models are really good at inference. It could be that they've also maybe memorized most of the questions. But that's like one finding, which was interesting. Another thing is we asked the models to minimize their own data. Because again, the way we do it is through an optimal search. So we actually removed things and did this. So it was optimal search. But we did another experiment where we asked the model, remove what you think is redundant. And we found that's the triangles. Models are really bad at figuring out what they need and they don't need. They just randomly remove things and abstract things, and they either tank utility or they just don't remove enough. So using a model as minimizer as is actually not optimal. So an optimal search gives you a very different thing than using the model itself would give you. And then again, I'm also bullish on abstractor. So sometimes you don't want to redact the data. You just want to, instead of saying I'm 29, you want to say I'm in my late 20s, right? So those tools, the models are really bad at that as well, but you're building tools and synthetic data for that. So feel free to talk to me about it. And then I think the least we could do is to have privacy nudging mechanisms that are built into your Chrome extension or what you have, so that it tells you you're about to send your passport number. Are you sure you want to do it? This is very lightweight. And we still don't have this, which blows my mind. So I think these types of things would really help people, and it's really good to deploy. So basically, what I want to say is, to make advances in this area, we need NLP people to work with systems people, to work with HCI people, to work with policy people, to actually build the right type of tooling. Because NLP people alone obviously either reinvent the wheel or pretend the field never existed or just don't talk to people. Systems people alone can't really do much. And then, HCI also needs to collaborate. So it's more important than ever to collaborate. And thank you so much for listening. The papers are here. This is an overview. And I think I'm good with time, right? Or I'm sorry if I went over.
Let us thank our speaker. Thank you, Niloofar. That's amazing.